Hi, welcome to Transfer Tea. Today I'm here with Rachel from Tiny Ivy Big Life, and we're going to go into everything about going to community college, transferring to Yale, and what life has been like now in a master's program, but also what she's doing at Tiny Ivy Big Life, and so much more. Do you want to introduce yourself before we get started?
Sure. Hi, I am Rachel. Tiny Ivy Big Life is my handle. And yes, I'm really excited to share anything and everything. So I graduated from a 2-year honors program in a community college, Miami Dade College in 2017. And I applied to 6 schools, one of which was Yale on a super whim. I had an alumni from my community college actually who went to Yale come back and tell me, you better apply. And I had 2 days to start and finish the application. And she was like, you better get to it. And so I did. And Yale accepted me a couple of months later, gave me a full ride on financial aid. And so, that is really what allowed me to go. And so graduated from Yale in 2020, took 2 years off to work, and now I am back for my master's degree in public health. It's been a journey.
That's such an awesome story. And I think we'll touch into the experience of applying in 2 days and reflections on that. But could we go all the way back to, I guess, 2015? And why did you end up picking Miami Dade and why did you go straight to community college out of high school?
Yes. So I'm born in Havana, Cuba, and I was raised in Miami all my life. Only speak Spanish at home with my parents, and I am an only child. So a really big reason why I picked community college is honestly because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where else to go. I was very confused on what I wanted to study, what I wanted to do after high school. I had always been a very good student because my parents were essentially we work overtime so that you can just focus on your studies. So please, focus on your studies. And so I kind of had that pressure from a very young age. And also, I'm very lucky in that I liked school. So I actually enjoyed learning and all that stuff. But yeah, I remember I applied to a couple of state schools and I actually didn't get a ton of money at the time, despite having really good grades. That's a whole other story. But I was kind of I feel like this is the universe telling me to stay close to home. And my grandpa actually got really sick at the time. He was diagnosed with cancer and he ended up, living 8 years after that. But at the time of his diagnosis, it was so intense. And my family is very tight knit. We're very family oriented. And so for all these reasons, I was kind of okay, well, I can buy some time. I can buy 2 years of decision making by just choosing community college. And I knew that Miami Dade had an incredible honors college program that was specifically created to help students transfer to 4-year universities. And so at the time, I thought I was going to stay in a 4-year university in state, Florida International University. And I had heard that a ton of people got scholarships after they did Miami Dade. And so I was like, great. My number one priority is to not have to pay a dime because I don't have a dime and I don't want to get into debt. So that was always kind of my guiding light, in addition to just knowing that I had the freedom to stay at home, not have to pay additional rent. I was very lucky in that. And yeah, Yale was never in the plans.
Honestly, I wonder what your experience was at Yale because a lot of people I spoke to at Stanford had a very similar line of I never planned for this to happen. So was it kind of similar for transfers there?
Definitely for all the community college transfers, we were kind of just this is wild. How are we here? What was your experience? And it was very similar in terms of a lot of the transfers I spoke to from community college either came from immigrant backgrounds or typically lower income backgrounds, which is a big reason why we all went to community college. And so I don't think any that I spoke with, any transfers from community college were expecting to go to an Ivy League. But I think that's the really beautiful thing of going to these community college programs. It's you're meeting people and you're seeing people that did do the thing. And you're you talk like me and you look like me and you grew up like me. So maybe I have a chance. And I think a lot of them similarly were encouraged by alumni who came back and were please apply. And so now I do the same thing always. And I'm currently mentoring a couple of students from my community college. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But that's also why I make videos today, because if it wasn't for for those two alumni specifically, one of which is now one of my best friends, I would have never even tried.
That's so crazy to hear, like the impact that someone can have on your entire like life trajectory. It's so incredible. And it's cool that you're doing that. I'm sure we'll go into that, but I'd also love to ask while we're here, how was Miami-Dade? And like, did you enjoy that experience? Was there anything that you still think about or that stuck out from that experience before you ended up applying to transfer?
That is a big question. It was amazing, and it was also very stressful. I mean, for me personally, I feel like, and that's kind of like an individual thing, but I know a lot of my peers did feel this. It was like the pressure to succeed because you don't have a high reputation, quote unquote, in a lot of people's eyes because you're going to community college. I had like people look down on me at first pretty often when I would say that I went to community college, like so much so to the point that I would stop saying like I go to community college. Like I would just say, oh, I'm studying economics. And they're like, oh, why are you studying economics? And so I would like veer the conversation in a way because I didn't want people to like undervalue me. And I graduated high school with like a 6.7 weighted GPA, 3.9 unweighted. So it's like I definitely proved myself in high school that I was like a hard worker. But as soon as people heard community college, it was like, oh, and I'm like, no, actually, I studied with some of the most incredible people on this freaking planet. Like I just remember like studying with like this, like for example, like she was a mom and she was going to school full time and she was working full time. And obviously she was a mom full time. So, and she was just in this like education class. And I remember her coming up to me and being like, oh my God, I want to learn from you. Like, I want to have more conversations because I feel like, you're in a younger generation and like, I want my daughter to grow up and be as like civic minded and like, as, questioning everything. And I was just like, how are you here? Like, how are you doing all of this? Like, I'm struggling and I am like taking care of myself barely. So it's just like the most beautiful people and people who were working two jobs, people who had just immigrated from other countries and like teaching me, like a full English speaker, all these really difficult like calculus concepts or things. And so I don't know, it was just like, it was very stressful because I felt like I was constantly proving myself. And at the same time, it was very inspirational because there were just so many people from so many different like walks of life all just getting it done and like doing it and helping each other. So it was really beautiful.
I've never heard anyone explain it with that kind of parallel. It really is true. Like there's so much to the experience that's so amazing and unique. Like it's not something that you get at a typical 4 year, but yeah, at the end of the day, like whether it's a stigma or whether it's even just like an internal like desire to try to prove something to yourself or to other people, I definitely remember being in different rooms and just purposefully not talking about that. Okay, so I'm very curious to know, like, where had you planned on transferring to? What was the process in like those 48 hours applying to Yale? Was there any sense of like, I don't know, I'm just so curious to know like what was going on in your head?
No, I definitely remember because I say this story a lot to the students that I currently speak with and encourage. And it's basically like it's never too late. It's like it's never too late story because I submitted my Yale application. I remember it was at like 11:56 p.m. and it was obviously due at like midnight. And I kind of just spent the day writing and I was like, oh my God, like this is not gonna work. But in the, my thing was always in the future, I don't want to wonder what if. Like for me, that question, what if, is like it drives me insane. And I would just rather try something and fail or not get it or learn than just wonder what if. And I think a lot of that comes from like my mom, my dad, like they didn't have the opportunity to study what they wanted or to even continue studying. And growing up, my mom would tell me that all the time. She would be like, honey, like never wonder what if, because I wish I would have like gone to college. Like I wish I would have, whatever it is, like studied psychology, like worked with children. Like she never got to realize that. So I think the fact that I realized that it's a privilege to even try, like I will take that privilege and I will recognize that it's a privilege and like, do it for me and for her and for everyone that I went to community college with that, for example, had their own kids and couldn't have that what if moment. So yeah, it was really wild. I had definitely written a couple of other essays, but again, they were mostly for state schools. And so I really wanted to go to Florida International University. It's an incredible state school. And actually a lot of professors from Yale collaborate with people at FIU. I'm just gonna say FIU. And a ton of my friends went there. My partner at the time was going there. So I was kind of just like, it makes sense. And so I applied, and life is insane. I end up getting a full ride, tuition and housing paid for. But they left me the notification in a voicemail, and I don't check my voicemails. So I checked my voicemail November 2nd, and it said, please accept by November 1st. And so I didn't get the scholarship. And that was like my plan. That was the only school I was going to apply to, because that's, I mean, my best friends were there. My partner was there. It was really close to my house. And yeah, you know, so it just goes to show, like, if life veers you another way, or if you quote, make a mistake, like, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Because I think if I would have gotten that scholarship, I wouldn't have been so scared and been like, oh my God, like, I need to have other plans. I need to apply to other places. And I might not have ended up at Yale. And I might just have been like, no, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm not even going to try to apply to anything else. Like, I have everything I want and need.
Sounds very much like something that could have been at least sent to you in an email, but I'm glad it worked out how it did.
And a part of me is like, maybe they did send it an email, went to spam. I don't know. It was like, I don't think about it. It happened.
That's funny though. Like, you say it so like gently now, but like at the time, I can only imagine if that was like the dream, and then you were like, oh my God.
Also, keep, like, for anyone watching, keep trying, because like I found another scholarship and I did get it, but it didn't cover room and board. It just covered tuition. But you know, if you really want to go somewhere, like, there are a couple of options.
Yeah, we can hopefully get into that, if not in a future kind of conversation. But I want to also move us along. You have posts sharing kind of realities and reflections of being at Yale, and like, it sounds amazing. But what was that like? And as a transfer student, especially, like, what was the experience like for you?
It was, oh my God, it was the most growth I've ever experienced in my life. Like, so accelerated. It felt like I was experiencing something that takes somebody like 10 years in like 1 year. And it is as intense as it sounds in every way, but like, it was so beautiful. I do think it took me a couple years after I graduated to fully let everything sink in, like, to fully recognize how much I had grown, how much I had learned, and to speak tangibly, like, not only academically, definitely academically, like, oh my God, it's so rigorous. I just found it really beautiful that I felt like in community college, I was challenged in a different way. I think I was challenged in terms of I was doing a lot of extracurriculars. I was learning a lot about like how to build teams of people that had different motivations. You know, if you're working two jobs, like, no, you're not going to want to come to my club meeting. And like, I get that. So yeah. And I think it took me a little bit to be like, why don't you care? And I was like, oh, well, of course you don't care. Like, you have more important things to do. So, but then I think at Yale, it was, I mean, I had never been, to just be completely honest, around people that were so high SES. Like, I was sitting next to, like, this is not an exaggeration, like princes, you know, like, in my classrooms. And this is like super embarrassing, but oh my God, I didn't know boarding schools existed in the US. Like, I thought this was like a European thing. Like, that is how far removed I was from the world of like higher education and prep schools and feeder schools. Like, I didn't even know what a feeder school was. And then like hearing about like Andover and Exeter, and like, I'm like, what? This sounds like something out of a Netflix show based in like the UK. Like, what are we talking about? It also felt like, yeah, just like the social navigation was a lot for me. It felt like culture shock. I am Latina, I'm Cuban, I don't speak English at home. Every single one of my friends from home is Hispanic or Latina, or like identifies as such. A lot of people are like Caribbean. Just the food was different. The people said I had an accent, and I had never thought I had an accent. And oh my God, like, it was just so much, and it was just a lot. Yeah, it was just a lot. And like, my neighbor was a Rockefeller. Yeah, and I didn't find out like until a year later, where she was graduating. Like, oh my God, let me add you on Facebook. And then I see Rockefeller. I was like, what? What? So it felt so weird, because it just felt like, yes, I was living the life, but it kind of felt like an out of body experience, where I was like watching someone living this life. And I never felt like I was actually, for a really long time, I actually didn't feel part of the Yale community. I felt like I was a visitor and that I was kind of being allowed in to observe. And this is not everybody's experience. This was my experience. Like the person, so my friend who, you know, convinced me to apply, I feel like she integrated really well into the community, and like so many people knew her, and I feel like she really thrived here, and she had her own, you know, I feel like almost every transfer has some sort of initial barrier to adjustment, just like anyone. Like you're probably moving cities, states, whatever, schools. But I think for me, I very much felt like an outsider for a lot of it. And really what was home for me was my dance team. So I joined like a Latin dance team, and it was the closest thing that I found to Miami. Oh my God, like so many like Latinos and like Caribbean people. And there are actually a lot of Americans, but that just either grew up listening to Spanish music or knew how to dance salsa, bachata, merengue, and were, I mean, it was just this warmth. Like I felt like I was home, and I felt so safe, and I felt like I didn't have to, I don't know, like speak fancy or try to change my accent, or I don't know. And it was just really nice. So I think, yeah, I always advise people that are transferring or even just starting college for the first time, like find that space, and it's intentional. It's not just like sometimes it just happens, but for me, I really had to find it and cultivate that and tune into that, because, and if it doesn't exist, like create it. Like create it. And that's something that I feel like I've been doing in grad school, because yeah, it's just so important to feel like you belong somewhere. Yeah, that's different for everyone.
It feels so nice to hear that perspective, and it's so raw and kind of real, because it's an amazing accomplishment and it's like a wonderful thing, but it's hard, it's different. It's for a lot of people, it's you are at least going through some form of change, and like change impacts people really differently. And it's also so interesting for me to hear what it was like at an Ivy, because you get a lot of this comparison of like, oh, like top three schools, like, oh, but it's, I mean, here I was like slowly learning, like I was like, I keep seeing this last name, like what does it mean? Like no, it's not like one that you know, but you're like, wait, actually you're from, is this what, like your
Name
family?
is on this building. Like
Yeah, exactly. And like stuff that I really didn't recognize, but I think it's just like you said too, like every transfer's experience can be so different. Even if they come from a similar background, like you're a different person. I definitely do feel like until you find a place that you feel comfortable, like it is for a lot of us going to be a harder transition. But like if you don't find it, make it, or try to find it, or reach out and like ask other people what they're doing and kind of dig. It's a hard experience to kind of go through by yourself.
yeah, to navigate. And thankfully we did have a transfer community. I think my year they only accepted maybe 28 transfer students, 28 or 30. 30 was like max, like no more than 30. So it's also much smaller. Like I have a friend who transferred from my same program to UPenn,
Mhm.
and I think her cohort was like over 100. And so her, like there was a lot more support for transferring. But I think that's also why now, like, I try to speak to as many transfer students as possible and just kind of let them know, like, I just felt so scared. And like, I feel like, I don't know, like, was always just very anxious. And I try to tell them what I wish somebody told me, which is like, listen, you made it. Like, that's it. Like, you made it. There's no point to prove yourself. Like, enjoy, have fun. Like, do fun things, like take classes that excite you, explore this new part of the United States or wherever you are, or the new part of the state, like, you know, like you made it. If I could tell myself something, it would be like, stop putting so much pressure on yourself to meet this arbitrary standard of success. Like breathe, you're good, you're perfect, you're worthy, you're learning. Like I feel like especially in this kind of space, you can just sit here and like you will just be getting so much from like listening to conversations and being around such inspiring people. Like you don't even really have to do much. I did too much. But yeah, you know, it all comes from experience. It's all like hindsight.
So you've mentioned a lot of little tidbits here and there about advice that you give to other people, advice you would have given yourself. So does that connect to what you're doing with Tiny Ivy Big Life? And if it does, how did that come about? What are you doing? All of the details would be amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Tiny Ivy Big Life is my Instagram and TikTok handles, mostly focusing on Instagram as like the primary channel right now. But I started it 2 months ago, so it is very much still, a baby. It's my baby, and I've actually been wanting to start this account, including the name. Like I thought about the name, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about. Just really the point is just to help, especially first generation students, feel less alone in what can feel like a very isolating experience. And Alejandra Campoverde just came out with a book called First Gen. Oh my God, I feel so seen. I'm not even finished, but it just talks about the price that you pay for being like the first and only, right? Like, yes, it's beautiful and amazing when you're successful and all these things, but there's also a lot that you have to reckon with. And, when you're experiencing so many new things, you, in a sense, start to feel a little bit disconnected from where you came from and how you grew up and like just culturally or whatever it is. That was a lot of what I experienced. It's like navigating this shift in identity or trying to integrate all of these new experiences and these new interests and parts of myself with who I was growing up and with how people knew me and saw me change. And so, yeah, like a driving force behind creating Tiny Ivy Big Life was it's really how I felt. Like it felt like I was this like tiny person and it was this huge life in an Ivy League and outside of an Ivy League. And it was just like, how do I navigate all of this? And as someone who is first generation student, is first generation like American to fully really be living here as an adult, it was just a lot of navigating. In community college, I created a mentorship program for first year students to help them navigate both school and career. So it was a 2-part program and it's actually still in effect, which is so beautiful. I think I called it Pathfinders. And it was basically just stemmed from how lost I was and what I wish I had. And I think I've always been very good about asking questions and being shameless about needing help. A lot of my friends aren't, and they're more shy. And I feel like a lot of the times I was the one kind of embarrassing myself in class and being like, I don't understand. And I also did it here at Yale, like in front of all these very smart people. I was just like, I don't get it. And I wouldn't always do it in class because I didn't want to disrupt, but I would definitely go to office hours after and be like, I just don't, like, what is Plato saying? Like, I don't understand. Like, does anyone understand?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, anyway, I wanted to create this account just to show other first gen students and just other people in general who feel, that either burden or pressure of not having support, like you're not alone and you don't have to figure it out alone either. And even if I can't answer all your questions, hopefully being candid and so honest and so raw and real will just show you, like it's okay to feel vulnerable. Like it's okay to feel lost and confused and to not know what to do. Here's what I did. It might not be what you want to do, but just to show one path. And I've actually been interviewing a couple of other first generation students so people can kind of have a different feel for the different pathways, kind of like how you're doing here. And yeah, I just hope to build a beautiful community of people who are first gen or people who support the first gen experience and are curious about it.
I love that. I love it so much. Obviously, everything is going to be linked in whatever description of whatever you're consuming this on, but it will all be linked. And I really love just the idea of giving back. I definitely was not a person putting myself out there very much. I think over time it got there, but yeah, like I even look at your page and I think like I could have used a lot of this. A lot of what we talked about, I wish that I had like heard those kind of pieces of advice and at least just felt maybe like not knowing the exact answer, but at least feeling seen or like less alone. Well, and thank you for what you're doing and thank you for sharing it and taking the time to be here. I think I want to just give you like a little bit of space to talk about anything that you feel like related to your transfer, related to your experiences that you want to kind of share. And like if someone is listening to your story, what you want to make sure that they take away from this.
That's a great question or the great point. It's all going to work out, like really. I know it sounds very cliche to say that as someone who, is getting her master's degree and all these things, but I didn't have a lot of answers for most of the way here. And I was really very confused and I just asked questions. And to be honest, a lot of the times followed my intuition and or made decisions based on constraints that I had. And that's okay. Take what life gives you, go after what you want, like always, seek what you want, but know that regardless of whatever decision you take, like it's going to be fine and it's going to be okay. And you deserve and will enjoy it, whatever ends up happening, whether you get into your dream school or not, or your dream job or not, whether you stay in your home state or go out of state, you can't go wrong. There is like so much life to be lived. So just know whatever you choose, you can never go wrong. That's what I want everyone to take away. And I wish someone had told me that. I would have enjoyed my time a lot more if I would have focused on enjoying and not just making the right decision.
Absolutely. Agreed. Like just letting go and going with it, because like how could you have possibly predicted like missing a voicemail and applying in 2 days? Like how can you like how can you possibly predict those things? Well, thank you so much for again taking the time sharing, and I'm sure this will not be the last Transfer T X Tiny Ivy Big Life collaboration. But yes, thank you so much, and yeah, just excited for everything.